So use any of that kind of outside real world knowledge, especially for psych soc.
Paul back for another MCAT podcast. Last week we got to hang out and talk about Psych SOS Passage 1, a full-length one from Blueprint. We're continuing our breakdown now with Passage 2, which I think the as students are going through this process, right, the end is getting near. The anxiety of like, I can finally be done with the MCAT forever. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I can go out and actually see some friends tonight. Although with the new 7-hour test, it's really hard. There's really no night anymore. I remember when I took the test, it was still like 4.5 hours on paper. I did my prep with a different company. Blueprint wasn't around, so I'm not scared of saying I did my prep with a different company. And they took everyone who prepped with them out to the bar after the MCAT as part of the celebration. So that was kind of nice.
I like that.
I liked it too. So again, we've talked a lot about transitioning from passage to passage, just some breaths, some muscle squeezes, getting some tension out, looking up. So let's go ahead and jump in and look at passage 2.
All right. And so I would reset and then just jump into passage 2 once I've kind of calmed down from passage 1. So first paragraph. Between 3 and 10% of Americans have a major depressive episode each year. Women are twice as likely to suffer from depression as men, and the highest incidence of first depressive symptoms is seen between the ages of 30 and 40. The second largest incidence is seen in ages 50 to 60. Depression correlates strongly with other neurological conditions, such as stroke and Parkinson's disease, and is also seen in higher rates among urban populations. So I pause, I say, wow, a lot of info. I would definitely want to highlight some of these kind of correlations, or women are more likely. So I'd probably just note that women are twice as likely to suffer from depression. And then we have these two age groups for these highest and second highest incidence of first depressive symptoms. And so I would note, 30 through 40, and then 50 to 60. And then the last thing that I would want to note is that we have this strong correlation with other neurological conditions. I probably would just highlight that. If I needed to come back and figure out what those conditions were, I could find it easier now. But if I highlight stroke and Parkinson's, it's not going to help me remember it any better. So I'm going to have to come back either way. And then lastly, I would also just highlight urban populations. So it seems like people that live in urban populations have these higher rates. So a lot more highlighting than I typically would want to do, but a lot of information. Paragraph 2, a group of researchers is interested in exploring the potential of ascorbic acid, or vitamin C, in improving treatment outcomes for patients with depression after preliminary data showed that ascorbic acid supplementation with anxiety medication may improve outcomes. Patients were diagnosed with depression using the criteria found within the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM-5. They then were administered a Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, HDRS, inventory for depression, which consists of a questionnaire measuring the severity of depression by ranking certain depressive feelings and behaviors. Generally, a higher score on the HDRS indicates a more severe depressive symptoms. Researchers assessed baseline measurements for depression using the HDRS, then provided patients with 4 weeks of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, a common medication used to treat depression. Half the patients were randomized to supplement their SSRI regimen with ascorbic acid, while the other half supplemented their treatment with a placebo. The study results are shown in Table 1 below. Okay. Big paragraph. There's actually, I'm not going to highlight the details. I am a big believer of big ideas. I don't get lost in the weeds. So towards the top of the paragraph, I would want to note what kind of the research question or what the goal is. So this potential for vitamin C to improve treatment outcomes. And I really wouldn't go into this middle of the paragraph with much highlighting. Um, but towards the bottom of the paragraph, I would note that we have like our treatment groups. So this researchers assessed. After that, we have these 4 weeks of SSRIs. And then I would just note that half supplemented SSRIs with ascorbic acid, other half had a placebo. And I wouldn't go after any of the details in the middle of the paragraph. If I need to, I can come back and check that out. Maybe you might note, depending on your memory, that a higher score on the HDRS indicates more severe depressive symptoms. I think I can remember that decently enough without having to highlight it. All right, and then we're given table 1. So actually a fairly short passage. This is the last bit of information, but read the caption. Table 1, the results of the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale, HDRS, at baseline and 8 weeks after treatment with either the ascorbic acid or a placebo. So I look at my kind of headers in bold. I have my ascorbic acid supplementation group, my placebo supplementation group. And I move down a line and I see I have, the baseline score on the left, and then the 4 weeks later post-treatment score on the right for both groups. And kind of hanging off to the left, there's this plasma ascorbic acid, some 50 to 150 milligrams per milliliter. Okay, maybe I'll need that later. But then I look at the actual numbers. I try to tell a story. So I glance at them, and looks like I have numbers with a plus or minus value. And right away, I see that there is a little asterisk by the HDRS 4 weeks later, that post-treatment for the ascorbic acid supplementation. And so I start thinking significance. We have significance given. And it's from 4.45 to 7.49 with a little plus and minus. Check down in that kind of bottom caption. That asterisk indicates a statistically significant difference between baseline and post-treatment HDRS values. Okay, I have that significance in this table for the vitamin C supplementation group. And I just try to tell that overall story to myself. Placebo supplementation, I don't see any asterisks and no significance. So they had that same score on the HDRS, pre-treatment and post-treatment. Yeah. Ascorbic acid supplementation, on the other hand, it looks like after treatment, they had a significantly higher HDRS. And I remember like higher is kind of quote unquote bad, more depressive symptoms. And so that is my takeaway. And that is actually pretty interesting. That kind of like rings alarm bells in my mind because we're trying to help people not make their depression worse.
Although if you believe social media, Big Pharma's out to get us. So
it's all coming together.
This Big Pharma is telling us to take vitamin C to help with our depression. All right, so that's interesting. I wanted to go back because that's not something we highlighted. I'm like, what was HDRS again? Was higher better? And so a higher score on HDRS indicates more severe depressive symptoms. All right, there it is. So that is no bueno.
Nope, not good.
All right. So question 6. So again, short passage, lots of information that I think a lot of students are going to get kind of mucked up in the middle here with all of these details. But again, mile wide, inch deep. Don't get sucked into the details. Question 6, based on the findings of the experiment, what conclusion can be drawn by the researchers? And so we kind of already kind of said, well, based on this table, without even looking at the answer choices, vitamin C doesn't look like it's helpful at all. So let's see if any of the answer choices go with that. So A, patients with depression should supplement their SSRIs with ascorbic acid. No. We just said the opposite of that, right? Answer choice B, patients should discontinue their SSRIs and replace them though with ascorbic acid. We didn't study that at all, right? We only looked at vitamin C with the SSRIs, so that doesn't make sense. C, patients taking SSRIs should avoid ascorbic acid. Yeah, that's the dead ringer for what we just thought about. And then D, no conclusions can be made based on the information provided. And that's not true because we do have this statistically significant number here. So I'm going to go to answer choice C.
Yeah, don't take vitamin C if you're on SSRIs for depression. That C is absolutely correct on that.
Yeah. All right. So that's a pretty straightforward one. Do you recommend that? Do you recommend kind of trying to, before you're reading the answer choices, trying to go, well, what do I know? What do I assume is going to be the answer? And then go find that answer?
So, yeah, I try to, my kind of go-to strategy on questions really for any section is read the question, maybe rephrase it in your mind if that helps to figure out what they're actually asking, and then make a prediction.
Yeah.
There are some where you obviously can't. It's like, oh, like it's just going to be too broad or too specific, and you have to kind of go through one by one. If I try to make a prediction, and then ideally you can have like one correct answer that just lines up like we just saw. But sometimes you don't get one, like an answer that sticks out, but you can eliminate one or two wrong answers that just completely go against your prediction. So I do recommend that. And it can save you a lot of time going through questions if you notice that your timing is a little slow on your questions.
Yeah. All righty. So question 7.
Question 7. In order to have confidence in their results, the researchers in this study likely ensured both diversity and parity across treatment groups for all the following demographic differences, except. And then we have gender, place of residence, age, and political persuasion.
This one seems too obvious, right? We know that women are more likely than men, so that seems important. We know it mentioned the urban environment as potentially an issue, and we know that age is potentially an issue. Political persuasion seems like a very easy answer here.
Yeah, I don't remember reading anything about what your political views were or what party you were in this passage. That's just out of left field.
Yeah. I wish the MCAT were this easy. Unfortunately,
that would be
it's not.
nice.
Yeah. Question 8. A drive reduction and cognitive theorist would argue that depression is most strongly correlated with a deficiency in what component of fulfillment? All right. This is like our first real psych-soc question here. Like, oh, I got to remember this stuff. Like, is this Freud? Is this some other dude? They're always dudes that have all these theories, unfortunately. So A, socialization, B, stigma, C, arousal, or D, self-efficacy. All right. So I don't remember drive reduction and cognitive theorists and what their kind of stance on life is. But obviously there is some theory out there that says, hey, depression is most likely because of this thing. So let's see if we can logically come to this conclusion. So most strongly correlated with a deficiency in which component of fulfillment? It seems kind of obvious that it would be socialization, right? We think of depression as more of a lonely type of illness, wanting to withdraw from society and not getting any fulfillment or any happiness out of anything. And so that to me, just right off the bat, seems like the most obvious answer, and not remembering drive reduction and cognitive theory. Maybe I forgot to study that one. I would just go with that and move on.
Gotcha. So for any question, any passage, always suggest reading through all the answer choices, even if like the first one that you look at seems like just the one to go with. So I'm a big fan of that because I think this is kind of a tough question. It really, I mean, you got to know drive reduction and cognitive theorists
All right.
If you know it, great.
I'm gonna pause for 1 second. I'm gonna pause. I want to redo. I want to redo on my answer. So there's this weird connection that I'm seeing between drive reduction and arousal. There's something weird there. And so I'm gonna change my answer to arousal, just because there's something weird with the drive of something and the arousal of something seem to go hand in hand. And depression being the opposite of that. So I'm gonna change my answer to C.
Smart move. Yeah, and C is going to be the correct answer. And really, this question really kind of comes down to this drive reduction. Because like socialization, arousal, and self-efficacy, those would all kind of make sense just in general. That hey, depression is strongly correlated with a deficiency in socialization, self-efficacy, or arousal. Stigma is kind of the opposite. We would think, oh, like more stigma maybe would be correlated with depression. So B is kind of just one I throw out. But then you're absolutely right. Socialization and self-efficacy aren't really going to be related to that drive reduction. So drive reduction, we basically have these things that we're trying to get rid of in our mind, these drives. And so we try to do behaviors to like minimize these pressures is kind of how I like to think about it. And arousal, we have that mental alertness, just like, hey, are we awake? Where that low arousal is kind of like bored, sleepy, maybe you're a little tired, kind of that low overall energy. And with like arousal, there's actually like some theories out there that you want to have this optimal level of arousal to kind of have your standard functioning. And so if you have maybe lower arousal as well, that's definitely going to be in line with that or possibly correlated with depression.
Yeah. All right. I got there eventually.
Read all the answer choices.
Yeah. All right. Question 9.
All right. 9. Abnormal functioning of which brain region or regions plays a role in the development of depression? And then we have Roman numerals. Roman numeral 1, frontal lobe. 2, limbic system structures. 3, the hypothalamus. And then our answer choices, we're maybe looking at frontal lobe only, limbic system structures only. C would be frontal lobe and limbic system structures. And then D, all of the above, frontal lobe, limbic system, and hypothalamus.
So frontal lobe, kind of executive functioning that I remember. Limbic system, I don't know, just basic like limbic system. I think of fear. I don't know if that is that true or not. But isn't the hypothalamus part of the limbic system? So I think the hypothalamus is part of the limbic system, if I remember correctly. This is so long ago. So 2 and 3 seem like they have to go together, and then 2 and 3 isn't an option alone. So I would have to go with D.
Yep, D is going to be the correct answer. And do you have any like Roman numeral strategies that you use whenever you see these types of questions?
So I think the strategy we always use is like which Roman numeral is in the most answers, and here Roman numeral 1 is in the most answers, and so I'd go, is Roman numeral 1 right or wrong? I think that's typically the strategy we go with every time. Is that a strategy you use?
So that's in this question. I would. I like let's see if there's 1 in 50-50, and that way we can eliminate like half the answer choices. Unfortunately on this, there isn't one that's in 50-50, but I think just having a strategy on Roman numerals, whichever one you prefer, like is definitely something that every MCAT test taker should kind of think about and try to use.
Yeah. So is the hypothalamus part of the limbic system?
So we're going to be correct on D.
Do I get that wrong? Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, the limbic system, like you said, what, like fear was the thing that kind of stood out
Yeah.
in your mind.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be like really kind of emotions, memory. And so like emotions and depression,
Mhm.
like we're definitely going to have that involved with depression, and that hypothalamus as well. Specifically, that's like coordinating a ton of hormones,
Yeah.
and some of those dealing with emotion, and like memory, or not memory, but emotion as well, like oxytocin. But that hypothalamus is like the big
Yeah.
coordinator, with like the brain and getting all those hormones.
Yeah.
And then,
I just confirmed the hypothalamus is part of the limbic system. So it makes this question a little bit easier if you remember that.
definitely.
All right.
And then, yeah, frontal lobe, you either know it or or you don't.
Yeah. That executive functioning. All right. Question 10 is the next passage. So we did what you said. We're like, oh, I didn't even pay attention. All right. So we got to the end. We survived. Any kind of words of wisdom on that last one there?
I mean, that's going to be one of those ones where, like, you have a lot of content on it, but you can also, like, I've had this happen to me, like, use outside knowledge. I remember I have one question, that comes up in one of the classes I teach, where it's asking about like MSG, and it's really like, do you know the parts of the brain?
Mm.
But I remember from like growing up in the 90s, like when MSG was the bad
The
boy
devil.
of the
Yeah.
food industry, because it was addictive. And so you can use that outside knowledge. And I remember like, oh, MSG addictive, like, oh, limbic system can sometimes play a role with like addiction, with that memory and kind of rewards. I kind of remember that from like a side note in my content review.
Mm.
And so I kind of went with an answer based on that. And it turned out to be the correct answer. So use any of that kind of outside real world knowledge, especially for psych soc.
Yeah. Not
Because
for
that
cars.
comes in. Yeah, don't use it in cars. But any of the sciences, you can definitely use it. And I do find that I use it a little bit more in psych soc, where it comes in handy.